Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. As I was working on another YouTube video, this bombshell of an announcement dropped today, and I wanted to cover this as soon as I could. So this is The Danes. This is a game by Spiel that is set to release in 2026 and is a long-awaited sequel. Started off as an expansion and worked its way into a standalone game that is not a replica, but an expansion, sort of thing to A Feast for Odin. So this game, designed by Gernot Kupka, is the brainchild of his for so many years. A little bit about the history of this game and what this video is going to be about is how the Danes came to be, as well as what might be expected in the finalized version. So everything that I'm talking about here is based off of posts that were made by Gernot on Board Game Geek, and some of these may or may not be in the finalized version. Some of the images that I'll show come from Board Game Geek as far as prototype, material. But anyway, and of course, when is this coming in 2026? So Feuerland said that they will work to have this game kickstarted, since it's a very big project that they're working on in the first quarter of 2026 for a release around Q4, Essen time, perhaps next year. So hopefully in about a year or so, we will have a lot more information about this game, and hopefully it'll be produced and delivered at that point. So that is what we have, and with this description, it looks very much like what A Feast for Odin is, and with a teaser in some of the differences that you'll see in this game. But in any case, a little bit about the history of this. So in 2019, this may have been conceived a lot earlier, but it was posted on Board Game Geek by Gernot that the Danes would be an expansion to A Feast for Odin. There were other ideas for expansions as well to A Feast for Odin. This is right around the time that the Norwegians had already been, expanded and released. That so the Danes, had some ideas. There was also talk of like the gods and goddesses, the kind of a pantheon type of expansion to A Feast for Odin, as well as the Swedes. And so I guess those have been put on more of a back burner, while this game has been worked upon a lot. And I mean, there is a lot. And so let's talk about some of the additions to this game, what kinds of components, mechanism changes and additions, what is coming to this game that we could potentially expect to see when this becomes more available and more information is known. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is potentially adding a fifth player to the game. In the homepage for the Danes, which was released today, it looks like it's only up to 4 players, but a lot of talk has been mentioned in the posts for Board Game Geek, and I'll show you where you can find this on Board Game Geek. It's underneath the Norwegians forum, but a lot of talk has been added or mentioned about adding a 5th player to the game. Here's a prototypical look at like the green player as being the 5th color that you can use in this game. And according to what Gernot had said, it seems like it's not a difficult thing to add a 5th player to this game. Maybe as in like Agricola, you might have to balance some of the occupations to match the player number, but perhaps that's not something that really comes into play as often as it would in Agricola. But in any case, we will see, if a 5th player is truly added to this game or not. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was a couple of points, actually, by looking at this prototypical version of the Homeboard. Now, once again, I do want to mention that all of these images are on Board Game Geek and are prototypical in nature and may or may not be a part of the final product, whether it's it visually looks different or if it's just not going to be in at all. But a lot of effort had been made to look at the Homeboard and make something unique and special about them. One in the early mentions, way back 2018, 2019, was talking about making each Homeboard asymmetrical and different, from each other, to make the game feel a little different. However, it seems like in the long run, that would be too hard to produce and balance. And so perhaps starting resources are going to be different in this game, similar to like a prelude type of expansion where you have a card or something that allows you to have certain items that are different from your opponents at the beginning of the game. Very similar to the Norwegians aspect where you have a hut or artisan hut that is different from one another. It's flippable, so you have like two options that you get to choose from, but everyone starts with one that is different and could potentially alter your strategy from the get-go. So looking at this prototypical Homeboard, there are differences in where some of these resources are, and so that once again may or may not be a part of the final product. But something that is teased to be a definite inclusion mechanically to this game, as is seen in the description for the Danes on the BGG page, is the fact that you have a tax board. And I think this is more in relation to the Homeboard will be double-sided. One side will be more or less normal compared to the base game of A Feast for Odin, but then the flipped over version has this tax mechanism that makes the game a little bit longer, where you utilize it in a very similar way as you would your Feast board, where you need to put in different tiles and components in here and fill this up as a part of the tax. Very similar to how you need food to feed your people. But if you do so, you perhaps get more actions, and or maybe it means you ultimately have a longer game with more actions added on that final round. But in order to compensate for that, not to go like completely wild, and because a lot of people in the normally allotted amount of time, you can easily fill your board, your home board, plus a couple of islands, etc., long huts, long houses, etc. And so the tax component may be a balancing act to allow for you to use some of your extra tiles to have to make them work for something, essentially, and provide an added pressure for you to think about as you go throughout these rounds to overcome those hurdles, as well as fulfilling all of the necessities to filling out your home board, etc. Right? And so, yeah, that is, I think, what is going to happen as a variant of this game. It probably, once again, will mirror, like, one side will mirror the base game, and then the back side will be a longer game that has this mechanism to make it a little tougher to meet all the requirements to get a high score. Some other interesting notes about this board include like an extra space for a new component that we'll talk about soon, added difficulty in these -2 spots instead of just -1s on your home board, etc. So this will be interesting to see what these home boards look like in the final version. A ton of new components are slated to come out with this game to increase upon what you see in the base game of A Feast for Odin. Here pictured are some prototype versions of some new islands that you can go to. In particular, they're called Kalpangs, which are like small little settlements that are more like trade-oriented or craft-oriented, where they have a smaller, it looks like they might have a smaller area to fit, like some of the beginning islands that you see in the base game, but they also have some additional areas that you can go with like new ships. There may be, I think, two new ship types in this game that you can go and visit with, to get some added benefits. If you place certain types of resources here. If I understand this correctly, you may be able to get another benefit of a certain type of tile there as well, and so on and so forth. And so this game is going to have new, islands, quote unquote islands to visit, including these new, Kalpangs and cities as well, which are going to be larger to fill. In addition to new things like new ships that have different interactions with some of these places that you may visit, new tiles, new weapons. I think an axe is slated to come out. And of course, new occupations. I don't have an occupation here pictured, but according to what I was able to find out, it seems like there are going to be about 200 occupations added to the game. I think a goal was to look at the occupations from A Feast for Odin and remove some of the unbalanced cards, whether they were too good or too bad, rebalance them, and offer new occupations as well. Perhaps even to add some integrations with some of these islands with the occupations that you play. In some of the playtesting comments from Gernut, the occupation has more of a focus in this game, in the standalone game, meaning that you will potentially play, twice as many occupations as you would in A Feast for Odin, which is actually something that is important to me. I've always felt like I've been held back in my enjoyment for A Feast for Odin because the occupations don't always play a major part in how the game turns out in the end, as opposed to Agricola and other of Rosenberg's more card-based games like Agricola, New Spirit, etc. And so I'm hopeful that the 200 or so occupation cards in this game play a more substantial and significant role in your strategy from the get-go, as well as you progress and ultimately score, throughout the game. And so that's a big hope for me. Other than that, there are other tweaks, new longhouses, new artisan sheds, or huts, etc. Similar buildings in that vein. New tiles, right? I think there was a 1x5 tile that was teased in some of the posts as a potential addition. Like Norwegians added a couple of different tile types to the game, and so we can look forward to that. And then, of course, a new almanac. If you look on Board Game Geek, there are a lot of historical points and references to what Gernut has been focusing on as inspirations for a lot of these components in the game. Obviously, as we are reflecting historical places and items, etc., and things that the Vikings would do and go to. So a lot of, I'm thinking a lot of thematic inspiration was behind a lot of what we are going to see in this game. And we've seen that in A Feast for Odin, where with the base game, you have this large almanac of what Viking life was like. And perhaps, I personally haven't gone and read that word for word, but I think a lot of inspiration was taken in the base game from what was researched and added to this game to make it a more interesting and thematically integrated, yet abstracted approach to what a Viking game could be like, right? And so I think that similar approach was taken for Norwegians, which was also headed and designed partially, or perhaps the majority was designed by Gernut, but as is the Danes. But I'm really excited to see what kind of integrations are and inspirations are included in this game, because as I continue to play more games along the vein of a more Euro style mechanism based type of experience, the more I appreciate a thematically inspired and integrated type of experience. So if I'm missing anything, so new dice I think are going to be included in this game as well. So everything is going to be like kind of the same when you look at A Feast for Odin, but altered slightly to fit the theme and inspirations that are going to be a part of this game. And ultimately, what I gather from the base game, the base game of the Danes, is that this is going to be a standalone game that includes pretty much all of the components that you would need to play A Feast for Odin for definitely up to 4 players, but maybe even up to 5. And so that has me interested in what this game would look like, if you own A Feast for Odin physically already in Norwegians, which I do. How would having this game feel any different? There was a post made saying that this game would only be offered as a complete set, so it includes all of those components, and perhaps it's kind of like a second edition of A Feast for Odin, where things are going to be rebalanced, and perhaps it would be the version of A Feast for Odin that will be played in the future. It'll just be called the Danes, I guess. Very similar to how like Age of Innovation reinvented Terra Mystica in a sense, and is its own game, but it's based off of the similar version of the game previously. And so some people might think that is not good, if they would rather keep their A Feast for Odin and all the components there, and just have some of the additions in components that the Danes offers. We'll see if that is offered in the Kickstarter or not. My thought is that it won't be, that everything here will be in and of itself and offered all or nothing, essentially. But would that still be something that I'm interested in? Definitely. I think if some of the things that I found in my research for this game are true, in the philosophy and approach of this game, making it an experience that is, more focused on occupations. If there are, opportunities to play this game longer and have like new mechanisms like the taxes be added to increase strategic complexities in this game and avenues, right? Then that experience will feel different enough that I won't need to, feel bad for having this experience in addition to A Feast for Odin. So I think that's the direction that they're going with. Perhaps a very similar direction that was seen with Terra Mystica and Age of Innovation. Age of Innovation is not just an expansion of Terra Mystica that you can play with the base components of that game. It's its own thing, and I play that, solely. And I don't play Terra Mystica. I play Age of Innovation more, and so that, for me personally, the Danes, may be something that I would find more interesting, because I don't play A Feast for Odin, regularly now, because I don't get the sense that I haven't gotten that itch to really dive into it a lot more, a lot deeper than I probably should, and I probably will. There's plenty of time before this game comes out, but I'm thinking that this is going to be, a standalone game that is similar but separate and distinct from A Feast for Odin, and I'm excited to have that experience and at least try out that experience to see if that is something that feels different as I play it, and would be something that I would return to, perhaps in conjunction with A Feast for Odin, but perhaps also solely for the Danes, and not return to A Feast for Odin, which may or may not happen. But that's all speculation, and I just wanted to go over this announcement and what we probably would expect to see with this game, and what kind of components, mechanisms, and direction this game could see. And of course, as we get more information on the finalized components and rules, that will be covered here as well on the channel. So thank you for watching or listening to this announcement video on the Danes, and hopefully more will come soon. Thank you for checking this out, and hope you schedule an appointment with me real soon. Take care.